Welcome back to another edition of the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill, Tyler, and Testa. And today we're continuing our chronological Disney discussion covering the years 1976 to 1981. Remember, last time we talked about the Bicentennial Parade, that Disney parades and events that Disney had done on both coasts. And now this is sort of the rest of the decade where Disney is facing increased competition from other theme parks. To talk about this story, we bring in our own venerable wizard, Mr. Jim Hill. Jim, how's it going?
I'm doing great, Lynn. Yourself?
I am doing well. Kids are back in school. It's the most wonderful time of the year.
Very true. Very true.
Everyone else was drinking mimosas at the bus stop, right? I was.
Yeah, that's right. Goodbye.
Bye. All right. So last episode we had talked about the bicentennial and the way Disney had celebrated it on both coasts. And before that, we had sort of talked about how in Disneyland in Southern California, you had started to see sort of thrill rides popping up at Six Flags and at Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah, to be specific, Knott's in, 75. I mean, think about it. Disney in the Southern California market, it's all about looking backwards. They've put America Sings out there, which is a celebration of American song. They've got America on Parade, their bicentennial parade. And they've even put Mr. Lincoln back into the Opera House. People forget that in 73 or thereabouts, they put the Walt Disney Story exhibit in, and which really didn't go over well with the conservative folks in Orange County. They called, they wrote letters, and Disney eventually sort of caved and created this really awkwardly titled show called The Walt Disney Story, featuring great moments from Mr. Lincoln. And trust me, folks, is one of the guys behind the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish with Jim Hill podcast. I know awkward titles.
Yes.
This was a bad title. No, but it wasn't as if they were constantly looking backward. During this same period, Disney finally rolls out Mission to Mars as a replacement for Flight to the Moon. Now, problem is, of course, it's been 6 years since we got to the moon, so, kind of not on the ball here. Well, meanwhile, down the street at Knott's, May of 1975, they opened the first corkscrew coaster. It's Aero Development puts it together for a kind of astounding fee for that period, at least for Knott's, of $1 million. But it was a minute and 15 minutes, again, minute and 15 seconds, that reach a top speed of 32 miles an hour. And with 2 6-car trains, they could get about 1,600 people an hour through this thing.
It's not a bad number for Knott's, though. 1,600 an hour? Yeah.
No, but it had, an obvious bump in attendance to the park, which did not go unnoticed in the Southern California market. So literally 1 year later, Magic Mountain unveils the Great American Revolution. This is the first vertical looping coaster. Evidently, this is, for coaster folks, this is a big difference. That Magic Mountain's coaster, corkscrew, the loops are barrel rolls, not vertical loops.
Yes, that's completely different. I'm
careful,
saying as I give you a quizzical look. All right.
Careful, then. You do not want the ACE folks, the American coaster enthusiasts, to come down hard on you. Speaking of competition in the market, just in one 9-month-long period over at Universal Studios, they introduced that revolving tunnel glacial thing that was at the park for decades, and they also roll out on the heels of the success of Jaws the movie, the Jaws Amity Harbor scene where the giant rubber shark comes out of the water at you, and then Knott's doubles down, and they open their Roaring 20 section with the now beloved but long gone Knott's Berry Tales ride that Rolly Crump designed. So suddenly Disneyland is facing a lot of competition in the Southern California market. And let me be blunt here, folks. The Disneyland Resort still dreams of someday becoming a destination resort like Walt Disney World. The hard reality is Disneyland Park is basically the world's most famous regional theme park.
Yeah.
And the people who run Disneyland are keenly aware of what their competition is up to and have been this way for decades, which is why if you weren't aware of the 14-acre Star Wars land that was announced just last month at the D23 Expo, that's Disneyland's response to the Wizarding World of Harry Potter that'll be opening up at Universal Studios Hollywood next spring. Well, I have a used Sarlacc pit to sell you.
Yeah. The funny thing was, talking about this current event thing, when Disneyland was talking to Anaheim about the possibility of not taxing ticket sales, which is, I guess, a long-running thing in Anaheim where the
gate fee. Yep.
The gate fee is not taxed. Disney's saying that they were prepared to spend $1 billion. If I was the city council of Anaheim, and I wanted to play hardball with them, I would have said, okay, so Universal Studios Hollywood's going to open Harry Potter, and you're not going to do anything? Is that your plan? To spend no money? That's your plan?
Yeah, and never mind the fact that, Disney has been paying the gate fee in Orlando for how many decades now?
Yeah, exactly.
Not entirely the Disney company's proudest moment there, but Anyway, getting back to 76 now. Just as America on Parade is winding down its 15-month run, there is all of this construction going on behind the scenes in that narrow piece of backstage turf between Tomorrowland and Main Street USA. To be specific, we're talking 45 concrete pilings being driven deep into the ground, and on top of these pilings, there's 36 steel support beams that are being craned into place to make this futuristic structure, a thing that Walt himself had once dreamed that would serve as this sort of the stunning visual centerpiece for the new Tomorrowland that he wanted to open at Disneyland in 1967, and this was Space Mountain.
So Space Mountain, it's been dead almost 10 years. He's been dead 10 years.
Yeah, and the weird thing is this idea literally was originally proposed in the fall of 64, though then it was called Spaceport and then for a time Space Voyage. It wasn't till June of 66 that Walt decided, we got Matterhorn Mountain, we should really call this Space Mountain. Intriguing thing about this, back when Walt was originally proposing Atlanta, it wasn't a single track thrill ride into a roller coaster. In fact, this was a thrill ride that had 4 separate tracks, and not only that, the ride vehicles came out of the mountain and rode around the exterior before plunging back in.
Oh, really? Because in the concept art, you see sort of these spirals going around the top of the mountain. So the mountain is sort of like a cone shape, an elaborate sort of rounded cone. But in the concept art, you see spirals going around it, and that, I guess, it was supposed to be the track?
Yeah, and what was kind of intriguing, again, borrowing from the Matterhorn playbook, Walt was concerned that if people entered the park and just saw this giant white cone shape, they wouldn't know what it was, and they wouldn't queue up for it. So he thought, well, look, one of the things that draws people to the Matterhorn is that periodically the track comes outside and you hear people screaming or laughing or whatever, and it's like, okay, that's a thrill ride. I want to get in line for that. So that was what Walt asked John Hench to do, design me a version of this ride that come outside of the mountain so people would see it, and more to the point, because they had learned the hard way that the Matterhorn really didn't have great capacity, so rather than the 2 tracks that were inside the Matterhorn, he wanted 4 tracks. But anyway, as you know, Walt passes in December of 66, and this idea gets tabled at that point. Just to be fair here, it only gets revived when, the Magic Kingdom at Florida opens up, and they realize that, wow, we don't have any thrill rides here. And, as they're entering their second year of operation, it was like, okay, let's pull that out of mothballs and let's simplify it. So, rather than the 4-track, let's go with single track. It takes them 25 months. They begin construction in December of 72, and to get it done, they have to get the world's largest construction crane, the Skyhorse, in place in Orlando to get this thing done. But finally, January 75, Space Mountain opens up, 2,000-piece band lining the People Mover track, and Len, you'll love this, and I'm sure the environmentalists of Florida enjoyed this as well. The opening of the attraction was commemorated with the release of 50,000 balloons, which... Sure. Yeah, manatees are still choking on.
Still killing wildlife to this day. So here's my question about Space Mountain. Why are there 2 different versions in Orlando and Disneyland?
Well, if they'd gone with the original footprint, the original ride layout, that sort of thing, for Anaheim, the ride building itself would have dwarfed everything else in the park. In fact, in order to lower it so that it didn't overwhelm Sleeping Beauty Castle and everything on Main Street, they dug down 17 feet below the surface of Disneyland just to lower the profile of the building. They had so much real estate to deal with in Florida that, they could actually put the show building itself outside of the train tracks. Where, if you put the show building outside of the train tracks in Anaheim, it's in the middle of Harbor Boulevard, which, just minor traffic settings.
The on-ramp on Harbor Boulevard these days is just incredible. So in Orlando, there are 2 side-by-side tracks.
Right.
In Disneyland, there's 1.
There's 1 because that's all they could fit,
Oh, Oh, didn't know.
So,
all right, good to know.
But anyway, again, same problem. This is a huge, lengthy build, behind the scenes, very complicated. So it takes 23 months. And Disney knows that, they have to do something to keep guests interested in the interim. So, which is why December of 76, they unveil a brand new improved version of the Jungle Cruise, which has got 7 new scenes, including the one that the Gorillas in Camp scene that Mark Davis designed, and 31 new figures. So it's like, hey, cool, new animatronic animals in the park. The sad thing is that while the mouse giveth with one four-fingered hand, he also taketh away. So 2 weeks after the new improved version of the Jungle Cruise opens in Adventureland, the Mine Train to Nature's Wonderland closes for good in Frontierland. And this is what I find genuinely intriguing, and what a lot of Disneyland fans don't realize, that we are still at this point, January 2nd, 1977, when Mine Train through Nature's Wonderland closes. We are still 5 months out from the official opening of Space Mountain.
Yeah.
Here's Disneyland, the happiest place on Earth, beginning construction on a second major thrill ride. That's how serious Disney was about, taking on its Southern California competition. It didn't even wait to see what impact Space Mountain would potentially have on, the park's annual attendance. They just doubled down.
Wow.
And then, to add to this, as soon as the Anaheim version of Space Mountain had completed its first summer of operation, the Matterhorn goes down for an 8-month-long rehab. And people forget, these days particularly, that when the Matterhorn first opened, it was basically hollow. And in fact, as you're zooming around inside of Disneyland's first real thrill ride, you could basically see all the structural steel that was holding the mountain up, which according to folks I've spoken to, made it that much more terrifying. If you look
able to see the weld quality, is that it?
Yeah, it was just like, wow, this is mostly made out of folding chairs and coat hangers. It's like, yikes. And so
is that Hubba Bubba brand bubble gum holding this together?
There you go. And it's so, and again, what's kind of intriguing about this is that Walt had always planned on finishing the interior of the Matterhorn, filling with ice caves and a certain hairy beast. But because the Matterhorn was Disneyland's only thrill ride for 18 years, the Imagineers didn't dare shut it down for the sort of lengthy rehab that this sort of extensive redo would have entailed, out of fear of, having the thrill ride fans riot in the park. It wasn't until Space Mountain opened, again, on May 27th, 77. And by the way, Len, you would have loved this. As part of the opening ceremony, there was a reunion of the surviving Mercury 7 astronauts. We got Cooper, Wally Schirra, Scott Carpenter, John Glenn, Deke Slayton, and Alan Shepard. Nice. And they put them in the Space Mountain cars, and then, so what do you think? It's like, it's just like the real thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Except for the pressure arc, and the possible deaths from, no oxygen. But
other than that, exactly the same.
But yeah, that's only when Space Mountain was open could they finally take the Matterhorn down for this extensive redo, which, by the way, one of the big driving ideas behind that is they went from a single bobsled setup to the tandem bobsleds that we use today. And just by that one change, they increased the attraction's hourly capacity by 70%.
Wow.
Again, the cool ice caves and the abominable snowman. I mentioned this because there's another Disney attraction that features an abominable snowman that people believe is long overdue for a rehab. And, there's a weird parallel that's going on here. I've basically been told that Expedition Everest is the Matterhorn revisited, that since Everest is Disney Animal Kingdom's only real thrill ride. Dinosaur, you might argue, it is a thrill ride, but that will stay up. There'll be minor fixes and futzes, the work that's necessary to keep it running. But that's going to stay up and running till Flight of Passage, the Pandora, the World of Avatars, right on the back of a Banshee soaring type attraction. When that opens in 2017, that is when the Imagineers will finally be free to go, shut down Expedition Everest.
Oh, is that the plan? Okay.
Yeah. Lengthy rehab, and that's when they're going to attack the Yeti problem. So you got to hang in there another year and a half, 2 years, folks. And to be fair here, given that it took the Imagineers 18 years to do what Walt originally wanted to do with Disneyland's Matterhorn, and close the mountain, add the ice caves to the Yeti, if it takes till 2017, 2018 to finally get the Yeti working properly in Expedition Everest, that's only 11 years.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say 11, 12 years tops.
Yeah, come on.
We've cut the delay here by 33%.
That's right. Okay. So,
all right, Jim, so you mentioned the mine train closing. I guess that's where Big Thunder is?
Yeah. And
so who came up with the idea for Big Thunder?
Oddly enough, we'll get into this in much greater detail next year when Len and I actually start tackling the chronological Disney World story. But that's actually a spin-off of the Thunder Mesa project, the thing that was supposed to be built at the Magic Kingdom in place of Pirates of the Caribbean. This was... God help us. This was a $50 million show building. And again, that's 1971 dollars. That was going to have this Pirates of the Caribbean like ride inside of it, Thunder Mesa. And there was also going to be a runaway train that sort of circled this mountaintop. There was going to be a Pueblo village up at the top that you could hike up to that would have a spectacular view of the entire park. I mean, it was this giant mega attraction. In fact, what's kind of ironic is that in a weird sort of way, the giant rock show building that's being built for the World of Pandora, that's actually going to house both the nighttime boat ride through the luminescent forest and Flight of Passage. In a weird sort of way, if you look at it the right way, especially given that you actually have to hike to the top of this show building in order to experience the Flight of Passage attraction, in a weird sort of way, it's Thunder Mesa all over again.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, that's one of the consistent aspects of Disney theme park history. Ideas don't die. The very idea of tackling that sort of thing. And again, a boat ride inside of, this giant mountain, just like what was going to happen with Thunder Mesa, coupled with a thrill ride that basically sends you down over the cliffs, sort of like what the runaway train ride, which eventually came Big Thunder. In fact, it was Tony Baxter who had sort of been tasked. Mark Davis was doing the ride that was in the interior, the Thunder Mesa boat attraction, while Tony had been tasked with sort of doing the runaway train. And, in this weird sort of moment when after the oil embargo of 73 had passed and Disney had, in response to constant guest complaints about, well, where's Pirates? They rushed a version of Pirates in. In fact, one of the things that Pirates right now is down for a pretty lengthy rehab. Right. In Florida. And in fact, one of the reasons it's down is to address issues that frankly hadn't been addressed for decades about how quickly this attraction had been put in. And, there was a lot of back-of-house work that was just being done on Pirates right now to make sure that they can get another couple decades out of it, because this thing just flew up. But anyway, the weird thing of it is that when the oil embargo ended and, that the attendants began to creep up at Disney World, they began looking at stuff to take off the table, and they were looking at Thunder Mesa. And Tony actually proposed sort of splitting the runaway mine train ride off by itself.
From the Mesa thing,
to be its own attraction. And for a time, there was some very serious thought of maybe we should be building two thrill rides in Florida, that Space Mountain and Big Thunder were supposed to go in virtually in the same window. And in the end, the finances in Orlando were still relatively dicey. Let's just go with one. But at the same time, here's Disneyland looking at its somewhat tired mine train ride, and it's like, hey, that would fit in there, wouldn't it? And, that's how it ended up there. Well, anyway, to double back to Tomorrowland, so Space Mountain opens summer of 77. But you have to understand, this is the first indoor dark roller coaster. And there's a lot of operational issues. I mean, 4 months into running the thing, they finally got it to the point where they were getting 32,000 guests through it a day.
Wow.
Okay. Now, you have to understand that's when the park's open from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so that's roughly 1,950 guests per hour.
That's not a bad number.
But when you think about it, Len, that means you're dispatching a new train, and there were 11 trains at Space Mountain at this time, every 21 seconds.
That's pretty fast. You're essentially just stuffing people into the cars, not asking them to get in.
No, that's it exactly. In fact, when it opened in May, they had a dispatch interval of 28 to 30 seconds, and the ops people kept beating on them. You got to get that number lower. You got to get them. In fact, they weren't even happy with 21. They wanted 20 seconds. Here's the reason why they never made this number.
Okay.
Right from the onset, kids under 3 were not allowed on Space Mountain.
It's a thrill ride. I get it.
But here's the thing. In this weird inversion of what the cast members who work out on the tickets booths deal with, where parents are out there trying to pass off kids who are clearly over 3. Oh, this is an infant. No, come on. He's 6 months old. Give me the I'm not buying a ticket with this kid.
I know he's 4'11" and he's shaving, but come on.
Yeah. Well, now here's the flip side. Inside of Space Mountain, now picture this. You're in the dark. This family comes down the ramp.
I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
And they're holding an infant in diapers. And this is my 5-year-old son. It's like, well, your 5-year-old son has development issues. But they're constantly trying to pass off infants. It's 3 to 4-year-olds. And so they ended up with these really awkward, very intense conversations in the boarding area where you got to understand you're in pressure. You got to get it from 21 seconds down to 20. And it's like, well, I'd love to, but these parents keep lying to me. That's what ended up happening there. And the other thing that Space Mountain, you want to talk about just the absolute luck of opening at the exact right time in the Southern California market. Mm-hmm. The attraction opens May 27th, 1977. On May 25th, just 2 days earlier, what film opens? Star Wars.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
So picture that. Did you go to Star Wars? In the morning you can drive to Disneyland and ride Space Mountain. How killer would that be? And a lot of people did. They had huge, enormous lines stretching down to Main Street, and thank God that this was the summer that the Main Street Electrical Parade came back. So at least it was something to distract you while you were standing in that ridiculously long line.
Wow.
And this was the new version of Main Street Electrical Parade, where they went with the more dimensional floats and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Jumping ahead now to 1978. Again, the park is dealing with record crowds. We're talking on one day they had 91,000 people crammed into that park.
Oh, my God. Could you imagine what that's like?
They weren't there for Space Mountain. They weren't there for the newly reopened Matterhorn. They were there to say happy 50th birthday to a certain mouse. Mickey turns 50 in 1978, and Disney goes all out. He's the first animated character ever to get his own star on Hollywood Boulevard. There's a 90-minute-long special on NBC where he receives birthday greetings from all sorts of performers, among them legendary ventriloquist Edgar Bergen, who actually died 2 months before the special aired. This was the last thing he did. You also have noted amphibian and eventual Walt Disney acquisition, Kermit the Frog, former President Gerald Ford, and seriously, if you can believe this, O.J. Simpson.
Awkward.
So, jumping ahead here, 78, we get the construction's still going on for Big Thunder Mountain. They're trying to reuse as much of Mine Trains to Nature's Wonderland as they possibly can. For example, that 7th to 8th scale buildings that they did for Rainbow Ridge, they ended up repainting, and that mining town then becomes the area you walk through as you're boarding, headed toward the load-unload area through the queue. Mm-hmm. Before I forget, the rock formations for the Disneyland of Big Thunder Mountain, some of which reach 104 feet in height, were actually modeled after the hoodoo rock formations from Utah's Bryce Canyon.
Right.
Because there's kind of a Disney tradition of having fun ride vehicles. So the 6 trains that they create for this thing all get interesting names. So you have I Am Brave, I Am Bold, I Be Hardy, You Are Daring, that sort of thing. Yeah. But in addition to the stuff that they save from Mine Trains to Nature's Wonderland, Disney actually goes the extra mile to try to make this as authentic as possible. So, for example, there's real gold ore scattered around the queue area for this thing.
Really?
Yep. Roseman, California. It cost $80 a ton, but they hauled this stuff in.
Through it all over. Okay, so it's not gold. It's all of the rocks that contain a little bit of gold ore. Okay, got it.
That's it exactly. And as you walk into the Disneyland version, there's this stamp mill that sits out in front of the entrance. Mm-hmm. That's the real thing, Len. They found this.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's over 100-year-old piece of actual mining equipment, found it in the middle of Mojave Desert, and then hauled it back to Anaheim to install at the thrill ride. But not to say that everything's real. That little engine that you see as you're going through the queue, mm-hmm. That's actually from a Disney movie that came out the year previous, the Hot Blood, Cold Feet, this Don Knotts, Jim Dale movie, and when the Imagineers were on the lot, they saw it and said, can we have that for the queue? The reason the Imagineers were on the Disney lot is that's actually where a lot of the rock work for Big Thunder was built. They started off with this 1-inch to 1 foot scale model that they proceeded to draw half-inch grids on. And then
Holy cow. Yeah.
Then they cut the model into 1-inch square slices, which they then used to extrapolate out to these 6-foot square chunks of steel, which they then cover with rebar and lathe and pull with concrete. And then they shipped that out to Anaheim with another Skyhorse crane, winch this thing into place, and then lock it down, and then cement over the seam, and then paint it.
You know, now that that's all computerized, that there's a computer that'll bend the wire.
That's it exactly. I mean, just when you think about how hands-on they had to be with this, but at the same time, it was such a step forward from the way they'd done the mountainscape for the Matterhorn. I just find it intriguing that during this, just as sort of a tryout for this, they were doing a lot of the rebar and lathe work inside of the Matterhorn for the ice caverns. And they were doing it during the rainy season of January of 78 or thereabouts, and immediately came back, okay, we're not going to make that mistake again. And they just ended up, taking over an empty soundstage at Disney, and were able to make all of these chunks that then got drove down to Anaheim. When you understand that a lot of early Disneyland in 54 and 55 was actually built on the lot as well, there's a nice bit of little creative symmetry there.
Oh, that's nice.
The problem is it's such a complex project, and the eventual launch of Big Thunder slides from spring of 79 to summer of 79 to finally they only managed to get the thing open on September 2nd, which is basically after Disneyland's ended its summer season for that year. But even so, it had a nice corona effect going into the year of 1980, which was the 25th anniversary of Disneyland. So Disney already started a bump in attendance for people coming out to check out their latest thrill ride. And the people who came to the park actually got to see a wonderful 25th anniversary parade, and there was the first of Disney's after-hours parties that they actually held a hard ticket event that was 25 hours long, and this was, sort of the precedent for the events we've seen them roll out, for leap year and that sort of thing now. Another thing kind of intriguing, 1980 was the first year that Disney teamed up with Make-A-Wish.
Really? 1980?
Yeah. In fact, the very first wish was for 7-year-old Frank Bopsy Salazar, who, appropriately enough, wanted a trip to Disneyland, and so they were able to honor that. And speaking of people making trips to Disneyland, as part of the park's 25th anniversary, 30 former Mouseketeers actually reunited at the park in the fall of that year. For a 25th anniversary of celebration of the Mickey Mouse Club, which shared a birth date with Disneyland.
Nice.
And just last month at the D23 Expo, 7 of these performers actually made to be specific, Sherry L. Baroni, Sharon Baird, Bobby Burgess, Tommy Cole, Darlene Gespy, Cubby O'Brien, who's still drumming, and Doreen Tracy. They traveled to Anaheim, and they made an appearance at the Expo. It's kind of nice to see 35 years after the fact that they could still perform. Anyway, jumping ahead here, so 80 gives way to 81. Mm-hmm. Disneyland Park still going great guns. This was the year the park saw its 200th million visitor. One Gert Chavez of Santa Barbara, California, pushes through the turnstiles on January 8th, 81.
What did they get for being the 200 millionth?
They got a lifetime pass. They got a weird little version of Disneyland Castle under sort of a bell jar. They were feted, throughout the park for the day, but it just, this guy and his wife and his 2 kids just, showed up at the park, and, suddenly it's like, why is there a red carpet?
Yeah, there's balloons.
It's like, oh, okay. But yeah, he saw a pretty good looking park because, at this point, from July 17th, 1955 to January 8th, 1981, the Walt Disney Company had poured $210 million into the park. So think about it. They've had 200 million visitors, but they spent $210 million building this park. So it's more than $1 per visitor, that's ever come through the thing. And that year, they upped the ante. This is when they invest another $46.2 million in the park. That's the amount in stock, Disney stock, that they swapped with the Walt Disney family for Retlar Enterprises. You may remember when we were talking about the early 60s when Walt and Roy had that horrible fight over who controlled, the part of the company that actually built the theme park rides and operated the monorail and the train station. Walt viewed these as personal pieces of property.
Right, and there was a shareholder complaint that this was potentially a conflict of interest, that Disneyland was paying Walt's company to build the rides, right?
That's it, exactly.
Okay.
And so, picture this. It takes them 20 years to finally resolve this.
Jeez.
But in the end, the company gets back the ownership rights to the Disneyland monorail and steam railroad system. More to the point, they get the rights to use Walt's name and likeness. And so this is something that, like we said, 2 decades they've been fighting to get this done. But now, finally, the happiest place on earth is under the total control of the Walt Disney Company. Should have been a golden time. They've done 2 brand new thrill rides in 5 years, and they now dominate the Southern California market. More to the point, Matterhorn's been retooled. You've upped the capacity there. Some stuff that Walt himself, you may recall when we were talking about the 10th of Disneyland, that Walt talked about his future plans for the parks, and one of the ideas was he wanted to redo Fantasyland. And as 1980 gives way to 1981, the Imagineers, it's like, yeah, let's do that. We've handled the thrill ride market. Let's add an extra layer of detail. Let's improve the Fantasyland dark rides.
It also appealed to parents too, right? I mean, parents who can't bring their kids on the thrill rides.
Yeah, that's it exactly. So December 18th, 1991, the first attraction goes down. They take the Fantasyland Theater and gut it. It all looks like Disney management at the time is in complete control, that it's nothing but gold coming up ahead. And as you'll find out, as we begin the next installment of the series, where we go from 82 to 87, nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, if you love twists and turns on thrill rides, you're going to love what happens to the Walt Disney Productions, which is soon to become the Walt Disney Company, is we see a complete management change. More to the point, we see the sorts of rides that nobody could ever have anticipated, coming into a Disney theme park.
Yeah.
So if you like Michael Jackson or Star Wars, you probably want to circle back on the next installment here.
That's fantastic. So this last 5 years, we did a Jungle Cruise, Big Thunder, Space Mountain, Matterhorn refurbishment, and New Fantasyland. Wow. And a Fantasyland refurb.
The irony is, here's Disneyland with a new Fantasyland, and here's the board of directors dealing with a whole new reality in Hollywood. We'll get that to the next installment.
Fantastic. All right, Jim. Thanks very much for the update. This was great. You've been listening to the Unofficial Guide Disney Dish podcast with Jim Hill. Please go on to iTunes and Stitcher and rate our show and tell us what you would like to hear next. In fact, our second show for this month is a user-submitted subject, which we'll talk about in a couple weeks, right, Jim?
Yeah, we will.
All right. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to the show. We will see you on the next show.
Take care.